Hello, everyone. I want to welcome you all to the 18th Annual Tallgrass Film Festival. My name is Hannah Bothner. I am the short film coordinator for the festival. Thank you all for watching and for tuning in. We would also like to extend a special thank you to all of our sponsors. We would not be able to do this without you. If you're enjoying your Tallgrass experience, please let us know on Facebook and Instagram. Tag us at Tallgrass Film and use the hashtag Tallgrass2020. I'd like to welcome to the Zoom today numerous filmmakers from the Sci-Fi, Fantasy, and Action short film program. I'll let them tell you who they are, what film they're with, and their roles in the film. We'll start with you, Paul.
Hi, my name is Paul Williams. I'm the writer-director of Frank and Mary.
And Philip?
I'm Philip Heinrich, and I wrote and directed Exactly as They Are.
And Michelle?
I'm Michelle Lang. I wrote, directed, I'm in it, and I edited The Caul.
And Hunter?
Hi, I'm Hunter Hoffman. I was the writer and executive producer, and I starred in The Creeper's Curse.
And Lenray?
Hello, I am Lanre Olabisi, and I am the writer, director, and producer of A Storybook Ending.
Well, thank you all so much for being here with us today. We were so glad to be able to show your films. Everybody should have just finished watching or have already watched your films, so don't worry about spoilers too much, except for maybe your fellow filmmakers. But I want to talk first. I want to ask everyone, and we'll go through the list here. Your source material, your inspiration for making this film. We can start with Paul on that question.
I think we wear our influences on our sleeves with Frank and Mary. It's kind of a homage to Frankenstein, a kind of sort of urban, suburban retelling and a kind of British twist on the Frankenstein story. And it's kind of, we twist that a little, being a retired DIY enthusiast resurrects his dead wife in the garden shed. So it's a kind of comedy take on Mary Shelley's Frankenstein.
Awesome. And Philip?
I think I was inspired mostly by kind of themes, ideas that I was interested in about kind of beginning to see your parents or other adults and authority figures in your life as you grow up, less as figureheads and more as people with their own strengths, their own challenges. And so I was interested in kind of exploring that through a fantasy lens. And as well, I shot a documentary a few years ago featuring a bite messenger. And I thought that subculture of this grueling work, but they all love it and they're like very dedicated. It was just very strange and interesting. And so I wanted to have a film kind of set in that world for a while.
So, Michelle?
The Caul came from just the idea of like, I have two children of my own. I work with a lot of children aside from mostly I produce and act in films, but being home with young children and like trying to help them, I'm really interested in how to help children kind of through their fears. How do we talk them through their fears? And I thought like the worst thing that could happen is I'm trying to talk my daughter through some fears. And it turns out that like her fears are actually real. And I'm the one who can't see the problem. Like I'm the one who's like not catching it, you know? And then I thought, well, what if children actually are the ones who can see all these things, and we're the adults who have like been trained, all of us since we were children, to like block out these things that are around us. So it's this idea that the spirit world is around us and the kids can see it and they're tapped into it, but because we are always conditioned like, no, that's not right, that's not right, that's not right. But what if their fears were actually real and something were to happen that they've been scared of, and we've been saying, no, don't worry, be brave, don't worry, be brave. And then the worst thing happens and you're like, oh, I messed it up.
Yeah, absolutely. And Hunter?
Yeah, so this script actually came about through a podcast that me and then the director, Blake Rice, and then a member of the cast who played the troll, that's not really a spoiler, but kind of a spoiler, Ricky Ryan, we do a podcast called the Cold Read Podcast, where we basically every week would write a brand new screenplay, and The Creeper's Curse ended up being one of those screenplays that I wrote. and it just basically evolved from there. Blake and I were actually roommates at the time, so it was really easy just to have meetings about, developing the script and everything like that. But yeah, as far as inspiration, I think it was mostly just like a funny story that I really wanted to, funny, ridiculous story I really wanted to just kind of put out there. And it was my first foray into producing. I've done a lot more acting and stuff like that, so this was the first thing I'd written and produced. So it's pretty cool.
Absolutely. And Lenray?
So A Storybook Ending actually comes from a feature film screenplay that I had written, and then I just ended up making a short out of it. And that idea for the feature film actually stemmed from a real life event that happened with a retired Black tennis player back in 2015 in New York City. His name was James Blake. He was standing around when all of a sudden, out of nowhere, this cop throws him down and throws handcuffs on him and starts arresting him. And he just thought he was being mugged, and he actually didn't fight back. And I thought that was very intriguing. And I thought if that had happened to me, things would have gone very differently, because I would have fought back. And I thought of, okay, what would have happened if he just started doing all of the wrong things, making all of the wrong decisions, and no one was there, and if he accidentally killed the cop, and decided to make it a dark comedy as well, because I thought that'd be an interesting twist on it.
Absolutely. So all of your films have, at least in common, that there are these elements that are sometimes have to have a lot of control around them. I'm talking special effects, makeup, practical effects, and stunts. Love to talk about the journey of deciding the special effects and using them, any challenges with them, anything like that. We'll start with you again, Paul.
We had a lot of special effects makeup. Luckily, John Moore, who's a really good friend and an amazing special effects artist, I've worked on with a couple of shorts before this, so I knew that side of it was kind of taken care of. But I think with short films, we've got a very kind of condensed amount of time to try and do as much as we can as possible. And obviously, special effects makeup takes time. So Roberta, who played Mary, would spend a good sort of 6 hours in makeup, especially for her final kind of stage makeup. And it's kind of a thankless role for her, because even in the script, she gets one line. I say a line, she gets one word. But she was amazing because she kind of never had done horror before, and she'd never done a lot of special effects before. And she's in kind of her late 70s, and she wanted to take this opportunity to kind of expose herself to that experience, and she was amazing. I mean, John himself said she was amazing in the chair. She would just be there at sort of 7 a.m. to start to get her makeup on and be happy to sit there till lunch getting ready. But then obviously that only gave us the afternoon to kind of desperately get as much as possible in there, and she had to wear everything on her face, and it was very hard for her to kind of not only act through that but also not see, because it does get to the ridiculousness of the final makeup where she's got a golf ball, again, spoilers, a golf ball eyeball. She's got this thing in her ear. It's all kind of DIY Frankenstein idea that Frank's just sticking as much as possible from his shed kind of onto her as she's falling apart. So it's very challenging for her to kind of find the kind of in that way to find the truth through that makeup. And she did an amazing job, because in her head it was like she's suffering from Alzheimer's, like she's kind of she had that kind of in the back of her mind of how she wanted to play Mary, that she was very much almost trying to find herself through that kind of zombified sort of state, and Mary finding her way out of that to ultimately make that sort of sacrifice at the end of the short. So it was incredible to work with her to find that while she's wearing all this kind of makeup. My kids came to the set, and it was really important for me to see what I do, but also because I wanted them to see the film afterwards, but I wanted them to understand this is just an actor in makeup. Here's her without the bits on. And so it was great to kind of, for them to sort of experience that and see that. But yeah, it was definitely a challenge, but one that the team really rose to, and as you can see in the finished film, it looks great.
Absolutely. And yeah, and she really only has that one word, but she's such an incredible actress that so much of like, you know, the body movement in her face. And yeah,
No, I mean, and that's what, you know, she brought so much to every little scene. And even when I put the kind of huge thing in her ear, she was really unsure about it at first. Is this too much? And even I started to doubt it. I was going, yeah, you're right. But then as soon as she started using it, and she even said, well, maybe I could do this, and that became part of the film that wasn't in the original script, and her just kind of acting through it was incredible to watch.
Yeah, it's amazing. Philip, the special effects and that really cool plant that ends up, I'd love to hear more about that.
Yeah, the creature. So a lot of my early background was in stop motion animation. And so I knew fairly early that was the approach we wanted to do. We wanted to make sure that it didn't look like something that you're used to seeing in like contemporary films with creatures and aliens and that kind of thing. But at the same time, one of the advantages of digital compositing is you can do these kinds of things that maybe remind you of like an 80s creature film, but they would have been impossible then because we also have all this digital compositing ability now. And we added digital motion blur and things like that help it kind of bridge the gap between stop motion and live action a little bit more closely. I think my friend Nathan Wells, who designed the creature, spent a good 2 months figuring out how to build that puppet because I had sort of the worst combination of features requested. It was translucent, which is really hard because then you can't hide anything inside it. And it had these 5 spindly little legs. And so then that was it was a challenge for the stop motion animator, Zach Macias, as well, because there's not really anything in nature that has 5 legs. So we had to figure out how that would move around. But yeah, ultimately the goal was to create something very strange that was a little hard to pin down how we did it. I mean, it's a stop motion effect ultimately, but the goal was to make it a little harder to tell what you're looking at exactly.
Absolutely. Michelle, I'm curious, you know, the salt shaker moving, that kind of thing, were those practical effects, special effects? And then I really love the way the disappearance it happens at the end, and I'd love to hear about the editing of that as well.
Yeah, so I tried really because I know I'm not super technical. So I worked with a special effects coordinator and I talked to him a lot about like, how do I do this practically? I really don't want to have to go in and post and like, do this as this. And he sent me a little thing and he was using magnets. So the salt moves, actually we have Nal Wynn, who's one of my good friends who helped produce, was under the table with that. And Ashton Nelms, who's one of the producers, and he and his brother, Ian Nelms, usually direct together, but he's also a storyboard artist. So I had the idea of how the shot was going to work to be able to mask the disappearance in a way that everything's in camera. The challenge is we had to do it over and over because it's not a perfect science with like getting the salt to go exactly right. You can't really see what's going on, but most of it was practical. Especially with like all the kids, like all the bloody stuff on the kids. There was like a lot of special effects on children, which was like a different challenge in and of itself. The little guy who has the really bloody face is my son. And my daughter got a little blood on the back of her neck and she was supposed to be in it and she started crying. She was out. She was like, no, I'm not. So we had to sub in a child. And then the end scene, I had it storyboarded, which is really helpful, obviously, with special effects, because it has to be precise in the way that you're going to shoot it and then edit it later. The challenge with that one really came, again, it's with children. So to get the blocking correct, to be able to have the kids in the right spot to have the special effects work was like an added challenge. But the end part, I shot 2 different plates. So a plate without the kids, a plate with the kids, and then I shot an empty plate. And then I had a special effects artist who came in and put them all together and kind of glitched it out for me. So it was like, you know, created a little bit. And you'll see at the beginning of the film with the credits, it's kind of like this glitchy world of like things glitch in and out a little bit. And so it carries through to the ending. But 3 different plates. It definitely just took, I think anytime you use special effects and then add kids to the mix who are great, but it's like, they're not a perfect science. You're like, walk up to this leaf, you know, and it's like, well, like they're 4, like you're not going to get that exact leap every time.
Yeah.
But it was good. You know, I gave myself enough time, and I like working with kids, and I thought it was a fun challenge and really up the stakes in something happening to little kids. You know, that's always pulls at my heart in a way that when something's happening to adults, it doesn't do the same thing.
Absolutely. Hunter, you had the interesting experience of having the effects happening to you. I loved the progression of the makeup and, you know, the black on the veins and everything. Can you talk about that the process in the makeup chair and with all of that, but then the you know, the troll, creating the troll and that kind of thing too.
Yeah, well, it's a huge shout out to Mackenzie Brooks, who's our special effects makeup artist, who is just a total champ. The crazy thing about the shoot itself was that we actually did all of that in 14 hours. Like, we only had a 14-hour window.
Wow.
So basically, we had, and this is a huge credit to our crew, who was able just to like come in and just, you know, like do incredibly well and be incredibly efficient with everything. She would start with little things, like I had these blue veins that started kind of appearing as the demon started taking over. And then like we had yellow contacts that were put in and blood coming out of my ears and all this stuff. But it was great because once I would go to do the makeup, go into the makeup chair, and then they would just start shooting other like 2 shots or something with Evan Williams and Asta Paredes, who were both in it. So it was incredible. And then we had Ricky come. Ricky had the same thing. He came in like 5 hours early. And then she just made him into a troll. Like it was hilarious because we were shooting in the restaurant, and then coincidentally our apartment was right above. So we had like our holding was all up there. And so Ricky came in, said, hey, and then left, and we just kept shooting. And then he comes downstairs and just doesn't look like himself whatsoever. And it was just, it was incredible. But yeah, so huge shout out to that. And then TJ Butner did all the other effects in editing and stuff like that. And did a lot. And Keith Jensen was our colorist and was able to make me look even worse than I already did, which was talent in and of itself. It was great.
That's incredible. Landry, the amount of stunts in your film is really incredible, especially that a lot of them take place in essentially one apartment. I'd love to know about coordinating those stunts and what that shoot was like.
So we had a stunt coordinator on set, and then we also had a Brazilian jiu-jitsu advisor on set as well. And I also have an extensive background in Brazilian jiu-jitsu. So it was really getting the actors. So I had rehearsed with the actors 2 or 3 times beforehand so that they became comfortable with the different types of moves that they were going to do, because it was important for me that they actually looked like, or one of them actually looked like he could do the moves. Like if actual person who knew how to do those martial arts were watching it, be like, okay, this guy knows what he's doing. Yeah. So I didn't want anything to look pretty. I wanted everything to look like a bit ugly, kind of like a real fight does. So it was like, it was a lot of work between the actors and the BJJ advisor and the stunt coordinator as well.
Incredible. And then you get the guns in there too, and I have to imagine that
was somebody else that we had to hire for the squibs and the guns and all that stuff. Yeah. Absolutely.
Well, it really just captures the action, and I loved I think action is something that it's really difficult to do, especially in short films, and it's really incredible to see all of that. Like,
thank you.
Felt heart racing. a lot of you, I think all of your films have cross genres. I know a few of them, it's like if you were like, we're gonna pick one genre for this film, you wouldn't be able to pin that down. I'd love to talk about crossing those genres and bringing them all together into your films. You know, Paul, you've got the horror, you've got comedy. I think we've got a couple of like horror comedy, fantasy comedy with Paul and Hunter especially. Yeah, it's even hard to sit here and say, you know, like it's these couple of things. It's always interesting to me when there's all these crossings of genres. Can you talk about melding those genres?
I think for us, I mean, for me personally, I think I can't seem to write stuff that comes out as pure drama or pure. It always has a little bit of comedy in there, and I guess that's just, if I have a style, I guess that's my style. So I do like that kind of Ealing comedy kind of vibe that the film has, and previous scripts I've done and previous shorts I've done does have that. And I guess horror always lends itself to comedy, and I think it does. I just always like that, just that ridiculous situation, that the situation that Frank kind of finds himself in, and how he just goes to that extreme, and that's what horror lets you do. It lets you go to that extreme, but it's always great to have that comedy just to humanize the characters. And you've got to really believe that Frank and Mary have been married for 40 years, or for however long you want to imagine they have, and then that also adds to that, I guess, that kind of tragedy as well. It's kind of got that a dramedy, I guess, if you want to kind of call
There's
it that.
Like a romance film in there too, especially with the like fantasy sequence of like the dancing. Yeah,
because that was really important to me, that you want that for the ending to work, especially to have that kind of sacrifice that she makes for Frank, and the sacrifice that, why is Frank doing this as well, that he cannot let go of his wife. He just doesn't can't imagine living his life without this person he's lived with for 40 years, and so he goes to this extreme of bringing her back to life. And for that to work, again, it's just David and Roberta, what David Troughton and Roberta Taylor brought to that. And again, being a short film, we didn't have the budget or the time to kind of do, we can do weeks of rehearsal. We can really work on your characters and work on your relationship and really make that believable. They met on the first day of shooting, and luckily they knew each other mutually outside, but they never worked together before. So we shot the sort of death scene first, right at the beginning, and immediately they're just laughing and joking. And I say to David, you know, she's just tired. She's died in the night. You've got to show that emotion. You've woken up next to your dead wife, and he just switched it on. He did one take, and I'm just standing there going, maybe I should do another take. It's there. I feel like we should do that again, because otherwise I feel like a bad director. Like but it was amazing that both of them just immediately had that chemistry of being that married couple. And I think so. Yeah, I think that balance of horror and comedy, I love playing that off against each other, and I think it always works really well.
Yeah, absolutely. Hunter, I'm really curious about like writing the different genres you had, especially the comedy in your film is so fresh. It's what I love to see in comedy so often is the kind of absurdist, the very defined and strange characters, and I love the interaction between his co-workers, and I'm curious about writing all of those genres melding together and bringing in that fresh comedy there too.
Yeah, absolutely. I'm glad that me and Paul got the memo, because we have very similar films and also very similar facial hair and hairstyles and shirt. So I think it works out perfectly. But yeah, it was so much fun to write all these. You know, you have kind of these I guess archetypes would be the right word, but it's like you got like the creepy guy, the guy who always gets too drunk and hits on women and is just a total asshole. I'm not sure if I'm allowed to say that, but asshole. And then you have his his buddy, who is more so he's still kind of a creep, but he's the nice guy, so it's kind of a little bit harder to tell. And then Asta Paredes just playing the straight man role, or the straight woman, I guess. Just was so much fun to write. And it's also, I'm a huge fan of putting kind of like real people into fantastical situations, and just imagining how I would react if all of a sudden I started getting taken over by stuff, and how my friends would react to it. And it was just a lot of fun to write. And then having, I think we had basically one blocking rehearsal the day, or like a couple days before, just kind of getting things figured out. But and a lot of things kind of came about as we were writing it. As I was Blake and I were kind of working on it, like the manager who comes in, who has no idea what's going on, but just really needs to get brunch started.
So great. He's so funny. I loved him too.
That role wasn't even in the script when we first had auditions for it. We just saw a Mecca who came in and just made us laugh so hard auditioning for another role. We were like, we had to write something in. And so the whole process of it was a lot of fun.
Amazing. Philip, we've got a couple of blending of genres here too, but I'm also really curious about the look. Definitely feels like a sci-fi film at times, but then sometimes, you've got the maybe more of like a family drama almost. But I loved the look of your film, the neon and the vibes. Love to talk with you about creating that look, and then about the melding of genres in your film as well.
Sure. So as far as the aesthetics, we always knew it was going to be about this bike messenger at night. So I think a lot of it spawned from that. And I didn't look at movies so much as I looked at like street photography in New York, places like that, where you have these gritty, mixed color temperature lighting situations and a lot of colored light. And things like where she's waiting at the stoplight just kind of naturally pointed me toward green, red light, blue light, and other places. And then we tried to shape the color progression of the film thematically as well. So we kind of end on the blue. The red is in the middle. It begins a little more tungsten. And so that was, I would say more so even than usual. I was really working through everything with the cinematographer, who's a close friend of mine anyway. And so we were able to kind of fit the cinematography to the themes of the movie as it goes through. We definitely had sort of a chiaroscuro film noir almost, or neon noir look going. And I guess that does tie into the genre blending too, in that it has, the situation that she finds herself in is completely absurd, but I guess it's a little different from some of these other films we were talking about, in that for the characters, it's dead serious, and it's treated somewhat seriously, which is something I enjoy, is like this, taking something ridiculous, and then if you were put into that situation, a little bit like what Hunter was saying, what would you do in that situation? And so that sort of absurd fantasy scenario or magical realism scenario is sort of a lens to explore something that's a little more, hopefully, universal, which is relationships with family and reconciliation.
Absolutely. For you, Michelle, we've got some of that family drama in there too, along with the horror and the fantasy elements. And I'm also really curious, because there is this like almost real world thing brought into because the Caul itself. So a Caul is a baby born with I'm going to lose the terminology here.
They're born in the amniotic sac.
Yes. Okay.
So
Thank you. That's the word.
It's fairly rare that it happens.
But
and there's a lot of folklore about those babies can be seers, or they're protected, and Yeah, so the folklore behind that is grounded in reality about babies who are like have this special ability to be in touch with other worlds.
Yeah, absolutely. So you've got the horror element of it, and you've got the family drama of it all, of, you know, this this man who's lost his wife and has this daughter that is hanging on to her in his eyes. You know, it's in his eyes, but in her eyes it's very different. I'm very curious about blending all of that together in the creation of the film.
Yeah, so the call came from a feature script that I had written, and I told Ian and Ashram Nelms, who I work with a lot. I mostly produce independent features and am in them usually. So I have a team of filmmakers that I work with a lot: Johnny Durango, Ian Nelms, Ashram Nelms. So I went to Ian and I said, hey, I want to do the feature of this. And he was like, okay, wait, hold on. You should probably do a short first. And I was like, no, I got this. But I'm really glad I did, just in a way that I had produced a lot and I've acted a lot, but directing, I got to kind of see a little bit, like try and feel out kind of my vibe on what I would do to it. The original script, I wanted to dive into horror just because it really came from the idea that I don't like horror films, and why don't I like them, and why can't I understand them in a way? So I dove into it more for my own benefit to try and understand horror films. And I watched a lot and figured out the beats. And it's really hard to craft like The Conjuring, like a really good horror movie that you're on the edge of your seat. But I also don't love a lot of gore for myself. Like, I'm not a big gore person. So that's, I think, why it kind of turned a little bit more sci-fi, because it's thriller drama, just because I find myself unable to sort of go down the rabbit hole of the gore. I like the suspense and the tension of it. So that's, I think, why the genre just kind of crossed. And it is a little bit of a plug into the feature, as far as like there's a much bigger story there. And this is just kind of the start of the lead. The little girl in this one is the lead in the feature, in the Caul, the feature. So you see how her upbringing of losing her mother and being not believed and having a traumatic childhood experience that no one believes her, like how that influences her as a grown-up. And then also she still is connected to this other world of like the spirit world that's kind of always around her, and she's really the only one who can see it, and how that tortures her as an adult, and no one really believes her. They just want to, you know, lock her away. But really she's got the answer to life, the universe, and everything, because she's the one who can see.
Absolutely. Yeah. Lenray, the genres in your film are kind of, you know, we got the action. We've also got, you know, the real world, bringing in kind of current events and always seeming to be current events. I'm curious about bringing in the real world, which you talked a little bit about before, but also the way you stylized the film, that it made it feel like you've got the kind of like the neon esque, I think, I don't know how I would describe it.
I always kind of call it a neo-noir dark
Okay.
comedy.
Yeah. That's
a bit of action and
yeah, absolutely.
But it really, the conceit of that came out because initially I was going to write it as a social justice piece. Because from the feature, because it's done from it's done from a bunch of different perspectives, and initially I was going to do it from 3 different perspectives, but then the feature ended up being from 7 different perspectives, and we had seen a bunch of these social justice films done really well before, like Fruitvale Station, Monsters and Men, and so I didn't want to go down that path. So I started thinking, okay, how could I make this different? And I said, okay, let me just make it fun. And then the more fun I made it, the more fun I had in writing it, and I just kept on going down that direction.
So based on that, I'm curious. So from different perspectives, it's that where we get kind of the non-linear storytelling of where we're jumping. You know, we see kind of what is happening now, and then we go back to watch what happened, and then there's the the actual video itself that the couple took,
Right.
where that comes from.
Yeah, I mean, in the feature, because it's very different. I just took a piece of the feature and just reworked it a little bit. But for example, in the feature, you actually see it starts out from the cop's perspective, right? And we see
wow,
everything from the
okay.
cop's perspective, and then we go back and we see another perspective, and then we go back and we see,
Yeah,
it just keeps on shifting.
that's really amazing. And where did you how did you land on the style that you picked for the film?
I wanted it to, I wanted it to look and feel like a very, like a neo-noir film, but I also didn't want it to have that stylized action that we often see,
Right.
like something from Sin City. I wanted to feel really real and authentic. And I just thought, since everything within the film was kind of I was playing opposites, in a sense, like, obviously with the title, then obviously with the music in contrast to what we're seeing. So that visual look, I also wanted to contrast with what we were seeing acting wise from the performers.
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. That's really cool. I like that. I'm very curious about the feature now. I'm really looking forward to that, because that sounds really incredible. I love the concept of following the different people there. So I'm going to go back to Paul here for a second. I really like the storybook feel to it, almost, with the narration over it, of Frank telling the story to the audience, essentially. Where did that decision come from?
Yeah, I mean, that was really early on. And again, like, some scripts come together really well, easily, and some scripts take, months of sort of hammering and smacking your head against the wall. But this was definitely, from the formation of this, I wanted it to have that kind of the sort of Aardman animation, which is kind of the Wallace and Gromit. Again, that kind of lends the DIY feel to it. But they did a series called Creature Comforts, where they just interviewed people about living in Britain. This was like in the 90s, but they then animated animals kind of talking in a zoo. So it was kind of very the juxtaposition of that, and I guess I wanted Frank to have that, again, that unreliable narrator. He's kind of the original idea that there was a kind of bookend to the short, where he's on the phone to a friend and he's explaining why Mary hasn't been around and why he hasn't been out that much socializing, and he's kind of spinning this sort of tale about Mary. So it's very much his perspective on what was going on. So it does, obviously, that it kind of that juxtaposition of what's actually being seen on screen, and that, again, that heightened reality of what's going on, of the the cats and the her coming back to life and all that. So it was definitely it was just important for me to get inside Frank's head as well, so you have that explanation of why he's doing what he's doing, and it doesn't feel like this just quite a selfish act of the kind of standard Dr. Frankenstein. It's more all about him. It's all about, he's going to be a great scientist, and he's going to, I'm going to be God. For Frank, it's not about that at all. For Frank, it's purely wanting to have his wife back, and I wanted to have that perspective, which is why we had the flashbacks as well. We had the kind of slightly story, like you say, that storybook kind of with the curtain falling and the dance. To have that, again, in a short, you don't have a lot of time, so you wanted a really quick and easy way of saying this is how close they were, this is something they used to do together. And the kind of ending we landed on, where you sort of flip it and it becomes Mary's fantasy, and she's kind of imagining that dance, and you don't get to see her. I think it was important for me not to see the angry mob kind of react to her coming out of the shed, and I really didn't want that kind of full daylight. Here's Mary, here's the creature kind of emerging from the shed. I wanted her reality to be that fantasy, and the reaction of everybody was great. Like the actors and the extras we got for that day did a really good job of just that disgust of seeing this probably hideous, decomposing old lady coming out, and my wife won't like me telling that when she goes back, we didn't have Roberta for that day because again we just shot all the outside stuff on one day. So when she goes back into the shed, that's my wife's legs going back in. She hates me saying that because obviously she's a lot younger than Roberta. But anyway, but yeah, it was really. I just like that idea of Frank's perspective being over the top with the voiceover, and like you say, giving it that sort of storybook kind of feel, that sense, that fairy tale sense to it.
Absolutely. Philip, I'd love to ask you about using fantasy to tell to talk about something deeper. I think that relating to, I think a lot of people could relate to your main character there sometimes I wish I could take a bite of the creature and get to know exactly who somebody is. I'd love to know, choosing to tell the story in this way to talk about the idea of seeing people as they really are.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I think I'm always a fan of something really, really heightened and exaggerated and fantastical as a way to look at something fairly mundane, even though in a way I'm actually more interested in the mundane part of it, but that's the part that you have to present in a fresh way so that it will kind of wake the audience up, hopefully, and make them think about it from a different way than they would otherwise. And the particular idea of this entity is that kind of rose out of my interest in animation and creating some sort of visual that would be unique and would kind of surprise the audience, hopefully. One of the things that, in hindsight, may have been more challenging for festivals and programming and that kind of thing is that it's sort of a fantasy film, but you don't really know that until about the 7.5 minute mark. So roughly halfway through the film, which as a viewer, I think is fun because you're like, oh, I wasn't expecting that. But in the context of a short, it is a big left turn. And that was something I was interested in doing, is starting it off as more of a grounded family drama and then building up to this strange surprise. And hopefully, because it's structured that way, the audience sort of feels the same surprise that the main character is, because the world of the film is our world until it's otherwise stated.
Yeah, absolutely. Michelle, I'm curious. So we end on a pretty big cliffhanger there. Is that something that we're going to get to explore in the feature? Is that the plan? Or are we going to end the feature on the cliffhanger too?
Possibly. The feature really takes kind of both parts of it. The part with the little girl turning into the lead, but then the part with the child is actually, her child is the one who, gets taken, if you will, in the feature. So it's a little bit of a mishmash of both. You'll see it, but it's not for her. It's not like something she went through. She went through a childhood where no one believed her. No one. And I have friends, my friend Michelle, also named Michelle, she sees spirits. And I just think it's such a fascinating thing to have to sort of navigate through your life, because it's so easy just to say, no, you're crazy. And it's like, what if they're not crazy? What if we're the ones that can't see what's really out there? So in the feature version, it's the mom who used to be able to see things really well and whose child now is starting to have those same tendencies. And because she had such a traumatic life having to deal with it, she's really trying to smother that in her child. And it's really like a daughter-mother piece, coming to terms with embracing each other's abilities and where that can take them when they do, embrace it and go to that place, like what they can change and what they can do.
Absolutely. I'm curious to know what filming the outdoor portions of the film where we go from the altercation with the cop to the people filming it, and then the really amazing shot where we come down to find out that they've been filming it the entire time and he's running away. I'd like to know what the filming of that was like.
Well, we got because I was actually expecting it to be a different location
Mm-hmm.
for us to go in. And when I was the heck was I was doing when I was driving around with the DP, we went there and then we figured out, oh, the spot that I had initially wanted just wouldn't work. And so we just started driving around in the neighborhood and we passed this one Subway location and he was like, this might be pretty good. And I was like, oh my gosh, this is actually perfect, because the overpass just, and the street was empty at all times. It's one of these places in New York that's just kind of desolate. So it just we got lucky and it worked out perfectly.
Oh, wow, it's incredible. Yeah, I absolutely love that shot when we pull down onto the camera phone. It's like goosebump worthy. Hunter, I would love to know what the thought process behind what the actual curse was going to be, because when he starts speaking like that, it's just it made me laugh so hard. But I want to know where that came from.
Yeah. Well, I guess in terms of like writing what as an actor, I'm a huge fan of Shakespeare, and so there was this idea of that, he just would wake up and just start talking like he's in the middle of a Shakespeare play, and then on top of that, then there's a demon and like all this, it's a Shakespearean demon, I guess. But so that's basically what the inspiration for how that all came about. And I guess that's pretty much it. But it was just
awesome. Well, thank you all so much for your time today. Thank you all out there for watching. I hope you all learned everything you wanted to know about their films. But if you didn't, I'd like to ask you all one last question. What is next for you? What is next for your film? We've gotten the answers for some of those, but we can explore that more. And then if there's a place that people can follow you, can find your future work, Instagram, Facebook, Twitter, or a website, something like that. We can start with you, Paul.
Sure. Yeah. Frank and Mary's been doing the rounds on film festivals this year. Obviously, it's a bit of a different year, so it's been a lot of virtual film festivals. So a great opportunity for people to see it. Probably carrying that on into 2021 because of 2020 being what it is. It'd be great to get it into some more festivals and get it into cinemas and stuff like that. And then obviously probably release it digitally next year. And at the moment, lots of writing of feature projects, lots of time to write. So I've been doing that. And if you want to find out about future projects, it's evilhypnotist.co.uk. So that's where the website, and then evil_hypnotist, and on Twitter, Evil Hypnotist Productions is my company. So we can find anything out about what is up in the future.
Awesome. And Philip?
Yeah, so exactly as they are, we'll be screening digitally at the Lone Star Film Festival November 4th through 8th. And we've got some other festivals coming out, including Film Quest, once they've figured out their rescheduling. As far as keeping up with the news, my Instagram is ergopossum, ERGOPOSSUM, or you can visit my website to keep up with my work at philipheinrich.com. As far as other projects, I've co-written a science fiction feature about a nurse who finds herself taking care of a bizarre creature. And it's not directly related to the short, but it's kind of a spiritual successor of sorts. So I'm kind of figuring that out, and obviously producing, financing, the business side of that is the big hurdle for me. So that's kind of what I'm hoping to tackle next, if I can.
Absolutely. Hunter?
So we're waiting to hear back from a few more festivals, and then hopefully get Creepers up on some streaming platforms and stuff like that. And then as for me, basically not really any more film stuff coming up, but I'm also a musician, so I've been recording some stuff here and there, so hopefully release some music and stuff soon. And then just kind of doing, random Zoom readings as an actor, which I'm sure people have been doing plenty of. Yeah, and you can find my stuff. My Instagram is at the Lost Wayne, which is also my music handle too. Or you can go www.hunter-hoffman.com for all future stuff there.
Awesome. And what did you say that podcast was earlier? The name of your podcast?
Oh yeah, the Cold Read podcast.
Okay. Awesome.
We've been on a hiatus for quite some time for obvious reasons. But yeah, so you can find that. That's on Spotify, iTunes. It's basically just a podcast where we each try to make each other laugh and cold read scripts. So it's a lot of fun.
Awesome. And Lone Ray?
So for A Storybook Ending, people can just go to astorybookendingfilm.com, and that'll just share all the news about the film and what festivals we're going to next. And then in terms of my own personal work, because I would obviously like to do the feature film next, people can just go to my personal website, which is lanreolabc.com.
Awesome. And Michelle?
So the Caul has just started the festivals. I love Tallgrass. We've had the honor of coming with some features that I did not direct, but I've helped produce and been in. And this kind of stuff is so fun because what I really find so valuable, just stepping into the director chair for the first time, is just hearing what people find interesting. So thank you for hosting this. This is wonderful to get some feedback, even virtually. It's great. So we're going to keep doing that. I'll keep getting feedback, keep changing the feature. As far as personally, I produced a film called Fat Man. It's about a little kid who hires a hitman to kill Santa Claus, and that is coming out digitally and limited in theaters on November 13th, and then digitally on the 17th. So it's a really crazy Christmas movie that for me has messages of redemption and to treat people kindness, kind of bubble wrapped in this epic thriller slash it's kind of a twist. So the trailer's up right now, people can check it out. So that'll be coming out. And then personally, you can catch me on Instagram at the Michelle Lang, and and then maybe going into another film that I'll be producing. We'll see. With COVID, it makes it, a little bit of challenge there. And with the Caul, I'm just trying to, I shot this a couple years ago. It just took me a long time, just between other projects, to get it up. So I'm not in a hurry, but I really like the exploration project, and
Absolutely. Well, we'll make sure to keep an eye out for all of your work in the future. And everybody out there, make sure you go and follow these amazing people wherever you can find their work. Thank you all out there for watching. I hope you enjoyed this conversation. Hope you got all your questions answered, and keep watching films.